Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The world thought this was war, until Earth's fighters rewrote history. The sky above Ju 9 boiled with plasma fire, bright as 1,000 suns and just as deadly. The air shimmered with heat, and the dirt below was scorched black from endless bombardment. Across the charred battlefield stood the Qatar, towering, reptilian warriors wrapped in organic armor that flexed like muscle and metal at once. They roared, their voices thundering through the atmosphere as if the planet itself feared them. They had won every war for 100 star cycles, they had wiped out the Creel, enslaved the Vari, broken the Zuran fleets in half. Now they stood on this dying rock expecting the same, a swift, crushing victory. What they got instead was Earth's 3rd Division. Captain Elias Grant stepped off the dropship, helmet tucked under one arm, squinting at the ash-covered horizon. His face was worn, scarred across the cheek from a war that wasn't even documented in the Universal Codex. His eyes, pale and steady, held no fear. The Qatar had numbers, they had strength, they had galactic reputation. But Grant and his team had seen war before the stars even knew Earth existed. The squad deployed in silence, no grand speeches, no heroic music, just efficient, brutal calm. Sergeant Lin patched into the comms and surveyed their surroundings through her visor's infrared scan. 10 clicks ahead, she murmured. Heavy thermal activity. Looks like the Qatar set up their artillery already. Grant nodded. We move in pairs. Protocol Delta, show them hell. They advanced like ghosts, silent, fast, focused. The Qatar, arrogant in their past victories, didn't even realize humans had landed until the first explosion tore their east flank open like a can of meat. Private Mendes, the youngest in the group, was the first to draw blood. She'd grown up in a refugee camp after Earth's freshwater wars, lost 2 brothers to pirate raids. To her, this battlefield wasn't terrifying, it was familiar. The Qatar screamed as she tore through their forward line with a plasma scatter gun, sliding behind cover like a phantom. They're smaller than we expected, one Qatar commander shouted, his voice crackling through a translator. But fast and unpredictable were one thing, suicidal was another. The humans didn't wait for orders, they adapted, improvised, flanked hard, used terrain the Qatar considered useless, mud pits, slag piles, broken husks of alien tanks, all tools in the hands of Earth's warriors. Grant ducked under a Qatar blade, rolled forward, and shoved a detonation charge directly under the creature's chest plate. As he dove clear, he muttered, "You think this is war?" Then came the boom. He stood over the charred remains and whispered, "Try losing your hometown to orbital strikes, then crawling through its ashes to bury your mom." To the Qatar, war was honor, structure, formations. But to humans, war was survival, ugly, dirty, and personal. They didn't fight to win medals, they fought because losing meant extinction. By nightfall, the sky still rained fire, but the field had changed. The Qatar had retreated a full mile back. Earth's 3rd Division had claimed the ridge. Lin knelt beside a fallen alien soldier, scanning its tech. "They're running predictive simulations, trying to guess our moves." Mendes laughed darkly. "Good luck with that, I can't even predict my own moves." They sat around their temporary camp, eating rations with dirt still clinging to their faces. Grant looked across at his people, scarred, ragged, but undefeated. "We're not heroes," he said, voice low. "We're just used to pain." Above them, the Qatar War Council stared at their tactical screens, disbelief turning into fear. "These humans," one warlord hissed, "they fight like they've lost everything already." "No," growled their commander, "they fight like they have nothing left to fear." Rain began to fall, not the kind of rain anyone from Earth would recognize. This was acidic, thick like oil, hissing as it hit scorched metal and synthetic armor. But Earth's 3rd Division didn't flinch. They'd fought in worse, under chemical monsoons, in the sulfur pits of Titan, through radioactive blizzards on Europa's colonies, and under the blood-soaked heat of the Sahara back when Earth was still killing itself. Captain Grant leaned back against a rusted-out hull of an enemy walker and let the drops slide off his armor. His helmet sat beside him, visor still flickering from a minor EMP pulse. He looked tired but not worried. "We've got about 30 hours before they regroup," Lynn said, checking her tablet. "They're calling in reinforcements, bigger ones." "Good," Grant replied without looking at her. "Let them come." The humans spent the lull digging in, laying traps, reinforcing what little cover they had, and hacking the enemy's tech. Mendez rigged a pair of motion sensors to a pile of broken Qatar armor, muttering old Spanish curses as she worked. Grant watched her for a moment. "You always this quiet before a storm?" She didn't look up, only replied, "When I know the storm's not going to end well for them." Night fell fast on June 9. The planet's twin moons rose, casting a pale red light over the terrain, and with it came the sound of drums, deep and tribal, shaking the ground itself. "They're taunting us," said Lynn, perched with a sniper's scope. "No," Grant replied, "they're warning us. They think they're being merciful, giving us a chance to surrender." The squad burst out laughing, dry, humorless laughter born from knowing exactly what kind of monsters they were up against and not giving a damn. But the Qatar weren't bluffing. When they came, they didn't march, they charged. 12-foot-tall berserkers, armored in living steel, wielding dual plasma axes and roaring war chants in their ancient tongue. Behind them, long-range biocannons the size of shuttles pounded the ridgeline, shaking the humans' teeth in their skulls. Lynn dropped the first berserker with a single rail shot to the eye. She whispered a prayer, fired a second, missed a third, but the thing kept coming even with half its jaw gone. "Grant," she yelled. "We've got heat down both sides." Grant didn't answer, he was already moving. In a blur of motion, he launched himself off the ridge, firing grenades midair before landing with a brutal crunch into a Qatar squad. His boots crushed bone, his blade sang. The humans had numbers, but the Qatar didn't have experience in dying. Private Reznor, a former pit fighter from Earth's underground war arenas, took on a berserker solo, slicing into it with repurposed mining blades, laughing like a man who'd stared death in the face and invited it to dance. "They hit harder than your average Earth cop," he shouted over the comms. Mendez was the one who finally cracked the cannon line. She crawled through a trench of mud and corpses, planted 4 charges beneath the enemy's biocannon nest, and triggered them with a whispered adios. The explosion lit the night like a second sun, half the ridge vanished, so did 2 Qatar platoons. But it cost her. She came crawling back to the human line, blood pouring from a deep gash down her side. Grant knelt beside her, applying pressure. "You good?" She winced, grinning through the pain. "Good enough to finish the job." By dawn, the Qatar retreated again, more cautious this time, fewer roars, more whispers. "They're scared," Lynn said, watching their movement from her perch. "They've never seen this kind of resistance." "They've never fought humans," Grant replied, "not real ones, not the kind who grew up on a planet that eats the weak." Behind them, the human flag, tattered, burned, barely more than a scrap of fabric, still fluttered on a bent metal pole. The message was clear: Earth had bled before, Earth had starved, burned, and clawed its way out of its own grave, and if this was war, Earth's warriors had seen worse. Inside a massive obsidian command dome, lit by pulsing veins of bolite, a dozen high-ranking Qatar warlords argued in overlapping roars. Tactical holomaps flickered, showing red zones where Earth's 3rd Division had shredded through every forward position. What was meant to be a show of dominance had become a nightmare. "These humans are not soldiers," bellowed Commander Vakru, slamming a clawed fist into the table. "There's something else. They kill without formation, without warning, without mercy. They are undisciplined animals." Another warlord growled back, "Animals don't kill elite berserkers with scavenged weapons and homemade bombs. Animals don't break artillery lines in the middle of a charge. Silence followed. Then the final decision was made: send in the Cathrex, Qatar's most elite unit, trained not for conquest but extermination. Genetically enhanced, psychotically loyal, and equipped with weapons forbidden by galactic law. Back at the human camp, things were far less dramatic. They ate cold protein paste and patched up wounds with burnt gauze and stubbornness. Lin had taken a bullet through the thigh, Reznor was down 2 fingers, Mendes held herself together with 4 different types of alien staples. No one complained. Grant sat beside a crackling energy lantern, polishing his knife, not for ceremony, just muscle memory, the kind born from 1,000 nights in 1,000 hellholes. They're coming again, Lin said, tone flat. How many? He asked without looking up. Too many, she said, checking her scope, but these ones, they're different. Mendes, leaning against a supply crate, eyes half shut, muttered, different like we might die tonight, or different like they just got an upgrade. Lin didn't answer, that said everything. The Cathrex hit just before dawn. They didn't roar, they didn't chant, they moved like shadows, fast, fluid, precise. Their armor shimmered in and out of visibility, their weapons cut through cover like it was paper. The humans barely had time to react before the perimeter lit up in screams and blood. Reznor was the first to engage, he went down hard, ambushed from 3 angles. Grant barely pulled him to safety before a second Cathrex emerged from the smoke, its blade hissing with plasma energy. Grant met it head-on. The fight wasn't clean, it wasn't choreographed, it was brutal, ugly, and real. He took 2 hits to the ribs, felt something crack, but jammed his knife under its jaw and twisted until the thing went still. Another charged him, Mendes intercepted with a jury-rigged shock trap that fried its neural pathways mid-leap. Her hands were shaking. That was supposed to be for the turrets, she muttered. Lin, from above, picked off 3 before they got too close, but even she couldn't keep up. They're adapting, she said. They're learning our patterns. Grant pulled Reznor to cover and shouted through the comms, then stopped giving them patterns. Break formation, go feral. That's when everything changed. The humans scattered, not in fear, but by design. They moved erratically, breaking lines, flanking in unpredictable directions, ignoring their own command structure. They fought the way Earth had taught them, chaotically, emotionally, with raw rage and cunning. Suddenly the Cathrex were on the defensive. One by one they fell, not because they were weaker, but because they couldn't calculate the madness of a human who didn't care about surviving, only about killing one more enemy before he dropped. By the end of it, the battlefield was a graveyard of torn metal, scorched bodies, and silence. Grant stood over the body of the last Cathrex, chest heaving, blood trickling down his side. Reznor groaned beside him, was that their best? Grant didn't smile. He never did. If it was, Grant said, they've got a real problem. Lin dropped down from her sniper nest, landing in a crouch. They'll escalate again. This won't stop, they'll escalate. Grant agreed, but they still don't understand, this isn't war to us, it's memory. This is what Earth raised us for. Across the scorched fields, the Qatar survivors dragged themselves back to base. For the first time, their warriors didn't argue, they whispered. Whispered about the humans who fought like demons, who welcomed death, who remembered pain better than any species in the galaxy. The broadcasts began at midnight, all frequencies, all languages. Every human helmet, tablet, drone, and display screen lit up in a flash of static before the Qatar's face filled the air. Not one of their warriors, but a speaker clothed in flowing ceremonial robes marked with gold rings signifying peace or surrender. He spoke in a voice meant to soothe, to calm, to reason. People of Earth, you are brave but misguided. This is not your war. Lay down your arms. We offer you sanctuary, dignity, an end to your resistance. Accept your place. You are relics of a violent past. There is no honor in extinction. It wasn't a demand, it was a lullaby meant to hypnotize, to make them question their fight, to pull at the deepest human ache, the ache to just stop hurting. Mendez spat on the ground. Sanctuary my ass. Grant didn't even blink. He stared at the transmission like he was watching a rerun of a cheap show. They're scared. Lynn rolled her eyes. They think we're going to surrender because they're being polite. Now that's adorable. But not everyone on the line took it that way. Private Calhoun, stationed a few clicks east, broke comms not long after the transmission started. By the time they reached his outpost, it was too late. His sidearm was still warm, he'd left a message, no words, just a single phrase typed on a dirty data pad. They're right. We can't win. The mood shifted. Even hardened vets started staring too long at the horizon. The silence grew heavier. They'd fought harder battles, sure, but the truth was settling in like poison. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and forgotten. Earth hadn't sent reinforcements, no medevac, no orbital support, just radio silence. They were alone. You think they're right? Mendez asked that night, voice soft, not afraid, just tired. Right about what? Grant replied. That maybe we're just dragging this out. Grant stared up at the red moons, one cracked, a perfect symbol for this planet, beautiful and broken. When I was 12, he said finally, my town got hit by drought. People started dying fast, one by one. My sister went first. We buried her with nothing, not even a prayer. I remember thinking, maybe if I just laid down and didn't move, it would stop hurting. He looked at Mendez, eyes hard now. But it didn't. It only hurt more. Mendez looked away. We're all cracked in the head. Yeah, he said, that's what makes us dangerous. That night, the Qatar sent in drones, not to kill, but to drop leaflets. Ancient Psychological Warfare 101, messages like you are forgotten by your leaders. The Galactic Accord has condemned your species. Your struggle is noble but futile. Reznor collected a pile of the papers, pissed on them, and lit them on fire, but it still got in people's heads. Then the Qatar played their final card. They hijacked human frequencies and played back Earth's own history, images of Earth's worst moments, civil wars, genocide, famine, burning cities, refugees crying in craters, looped over and over. The message was clear, this is who you are. You don't deserve to fight us. They thought shame would break the humans. They didn't understand it only reminded them why they fought. By morning, Grant gathered the squad. No big speech, just this, they want us to hate ourselves. They want us to give up. But Earth raised us with scars, not pride. We were born in fire, so now we give it back. He pulled out a signal beacon. We're going dark, no more comms, no more broadcasts, no more listening to them. From now on, we speak one language, pain. With that, the 3rd Division disappeared into the fog like ghosts. The Qatar kept broadcasting, but Earth's warriors had stopped listening. It started with silence, no more calls, no more signals, no more signs of life. For the Qatar, it was unnerving. Their scans showed faint human heat signatures but erratic patterns, no formations, no outposts, just ghost trails. It was as if Earth's warriors had vanished into the planet itself. Commander Vakra stood in the center of the tactical dome, staring at the reports pouring in. Nothing, he asked. His second-in-command nodded stiffly. Scouts report abandoned zones, old weapons left in place, burned rations. They look like they retreated, but they didn't leave. The Qatar didn't understand, they were used to enemies who broke, who ran. But these humans hadn't broken, they'd gone feral, primitive, untrackable. What they didn't know was that Grant had flipped the entire strategy. No more defenses, he told the squad. No more holding ground. We make them chase us, wear them down, break their rhythm. Lynn grinned. Guerrilla style. Grant shook his head. Worse. We fight like rats in a trap, desperate, filthy, smart. And that's exactly what they did. The Qatar advanced confidently through valleys and broken settlements, only to walk into traps that made no sense. Entire battalions were lured into narrow canyons with staged human corpses booby-trapped with mines under their bodies. 2 armored vehicles rolled over a false bridge rigged with remote acid charges. Elite commandos fell into pit traps lined with scorched Qatar armor, then were picked off one by snipers they couldn't see. It was madness. But it worked. The humans weren't trying to win anymore, they were trying to bleed the enemy slowly, painfully, one cut at a time. Mendes worked through the night building whisper bombs, devices that made constant low-frequency sounds to scramble enemy communication. She placed them in trees, under rocks, even in the guts of dead Qatar. By morning, the enemy's headsets were filled with static voices echoing, and some even began to panic. Reznor, with his mangled hand, started recording the death screams of fallen Qatar and splicing them into audio loops. They broadcast them at random intervals, making it sound like the Qatar's own soldiers were begging for help from the fog. "They're not sure what's real anymore," he said, half laughing, eyes bloodshot. "Good, that's the first step to losing." The psychological warfare had flipped everything. The Qatar's broadcasts, their leaflets, their appeals to logic, now they felt hollow, because the humans didn't care. The humans weren't fighting for politics or glory, they were fighting to ruin the enemy's soul. One night, a Qatar patrol found what looked like a human child wandering the forest alone, bloody, crying. They approached carefully, unsure. Then the child lifted its head and smiled. Boom, a tripwire mine rigged to a puppet. 3 dead, 2 more wounded. "This is savagery," one Qatar lieutenant growled, limping back to base. "They are beneath us," Vakru slammed his fist down. "Then why are they winning?" Back in the human hideout, deep underground in a collapsed tunnel system the Qatar believed unusable, Grant crouched over a map scratched into dirt and blood on a metal plate. "They're unraveling," he said. "They think honor wins wars. We know different. We know what it takes." Lynn lit a homemade torch and whispered, "What's the next move?" Grant didn't look up. "We hit their food supply, poison their water filters, turn their reinforcements against them, then, when they're starving, sick, and desperate, he finally met their eyes, what was left of them, we show them what Earth really is." Outside, the wind howled over fields of smoke and ash. Buried in that ash, hidden beneath alien soil and old bones, Earth's warriors waited, with knives in their teeth and nothing left to lose. The infection began slowly. Not a virus of the body, but a rot in the mind, doubt. The first signs were small. Qatar patrols reported hearing voices where no humans had been seen, some swore they saw ghostly figures, humans with faces burned off, eyes glowing, walking through fire untouched. Of course none of it was real. Not exactly. But Earth's warriors had been in enough wars to know, you don't need to kill the body when you can break the spirit. Grant had tasked Mendes and Reznor with setting up whispers across the valley, portable audio loop stations hidden inside old helmets and salvaged drone parts. They played hours of screams, static, and warped human lullabies slowed to a crawl. It didn't hurt anyone physically, but it made the Qatar afraid to sleep, and that was the beginning of the end. In their main base, Commander Vakra faced his war council again. What remained of them? One lieutenant had shot himself in the head the night before. Another had fled into the waste screaming about red-eyed humans melting into the wind. Their rations were compromised, half their water filters sabotaged. Those who weren't hallucinating were fighting among themselves. "They're inside our lines," a captain insisted. "They have to be." But scans showed nothing. No tracks, no heat signatures, because Earth's warriors weren't in their lines, they were under them. Literally. Grant had discovered a network of collapsed mining tunnels beneath the base, dismissed by the Qatar as unusable. But humans dug through rubble with bleeding hands if it meant survival. Now those tunnels ran directly beneath the heart of the enemy. "We've got charges ready," Mendez said. "Enough to bring down half the camp." "We don't hit yet," Grant said. "We let them keep festering. Let the sickness spread." Lynn nodded, though her face had grown paler. "We're losing weight, morale's low on our side too." Grant stared at her. "Let them feel it. Let everyone feel it. That's how you win a war, by outlasting hell." Reznor coughed blood, his collar was soaked. "If I die before this ends," he muttered, "just make sure one of them sees my face when it happens." It was no longer about tactics. It had become personal. The Qatar began pulling their troops back, leaving sectors entirely. They torched forests, burned their own watchtowers in desperation, trying to cleanse whatever phantom they thought had infected the terrain. But they didn't know the truth, the humans weren't ghosts, they were wounds. And Earth had taught them how to fester. One night, as acid rain fell, a single human walked straight into the Qatar camp, no armor, no weapon, hands raised. It was Lynn, sick, bleeding, barely able to stand. They captured her instantly. She didn't fight, she smiled. "Now you'll see," she whispered, eyes glazed, "what it's like when the monsters don't leave." Vakru stood over her, trembling. "You're just one soldier," he snarled. "You can't win this." Lynn coughed, blood trailing from her lips. "You already lost, you just haven't collapsed yet." Then she laughed. Somewhere deep beneath their feet, the charges Grant had wired by hand clicked to life. A low, humming chorus of death, not an explosion yet, just the promise of it. The entire camp froze because they knew, Earth's warriors hadn't vanished, they'd burrowed inside the Qatar's very soul and begun to chew. The sky cracked open with a distant boom, far away, yet deep enough to be felt in the bones. Inside the Qatar base, silence followed. Not the kind of tactical quiet bred from discipline or numbers. This was the silence of waiting for death. Commander Vakra stood over Lynn, the human prisoner strapped to a vertical slab in the center of their command dome. Her heart was slowing, she could feel vibrations below. Grant was close. One of the Qatar soldiers approached her, claws trembling. "Why won't you stop fighting?" She turned her head, barely breathing. "Because where we come from, the war never stops. We just learn to live in it." That's when the lights in the dome flickered, one by one. Grant's voice echoed across an open, hijacked comm system, projected into every speaker. No theatrics, no bravado, just his voice, low and steady. "You should have killed us the moment you landed, but you hesitated. You thought we'd surrender like your other victims. You thought Earth was weak. You were wrong. Now you get to die in the dark." Grant pressed the detonator. The world buckled above ground, the dome imploded inward with the force of a collapsing mountain. Qatar screamed as steel and stone caved over their heads, fire shooting through cracks in the earth, buildings folding like cards, towers of ash mushrooming into the air. Inside the tunnels, the humans didn't try to run, they simply held their ground, listening as their enemies were buried alive. Lynn, somehow still conscious, watched the dome fall from her perch. The shockwave hit her a second later, tearing her restraints apart. She was thrown back but alive. She crawled through dust and blood until she reached open air, then collapsed. Hours passed. The battlefield was quiet again, not the quiet of fear, but the quiet of aftermath. The Qatar base was gone, nothing left but smoke, silence, and one tattered human flag fluttering among the ruins. From the shattered tunnel below, a hand emerged. Grant, alive, barely, pulled himself out. Behind him, Reznor crawled free, one leg missing, eyes wild. Mendez came next, covered in burns but grinning like she'd just finished a good joke. One by one, the last of Earth's warriors rose from the dirt, blackened, bleeding, but still standing. They didn't cheer or cry, they just looked at what they had done and knew it wasn't over, because war was all they'd ever known, and Earth wasn't finished sending its message. A week after the collapse of the Qatar Command Dome, the first Galactic drones arrived, silver ovals blinking with diplomatic lights, broadcasting peace messages in every known language. They hovered cautiously, scanning for threats, offering aid. Grant didn't shoot them down, he just didn't answer. They dropped food, medical supplies, a new comm relay, and still, silence from the humans. Then came the analysts, the scholars, the galactic media, all wanting to understand how Earth, primitive, unstable, unworthy, had broken the mightiest war machine the galaxy had known. They never got their answers, because those who survived didn't want to talk. What could they say? That they'd won by becoming worse monsters than the enemy, that they'd laughed while bleeding and slept beside corpses they used for warmth, that the only reason they were still alive was because they'd accepted something the Qatar never could, that peace is a luxury of the naive. So the stories spread without them. The myths grew, tales of warriors who didn't sleep, of humans who carved weapons from the bones of the fallen, of a captain who burned an entire base just to send a message. The galaxy whispered one name, Earth. Not as a threat, as a warning. Alien civilizations that once mocked humanity began rewriting their diplomacy manuals. Recruitment centers quieted, removing Earth from their conquest plans. Scholars studied Earth's past, not as a curiosity, but as a cautionary tale. Because the humans didn't win the war, they survived it. And that was worse. Months later, Grant received a message through the new comm relay. It wasn't from Earth, it was from a small outer rim species called the Terrell, no military, no ships, just a question. If the Qatar come for us next, will Earth help? Grant stared at the message a long time, then finally responded, 4 words. Fight, bleed, then speak. No comfort, no promise, just the truth. Because Earth didn't raise heroes, it raised survivors. And now, the stars would never forget what happened on June 9.